This video is sponsored by Squarespace. It's time to rate the school of 2024 from best to worst. All 23 drivers who've participated in at least 3 races this season, sorry Jack, are in the mix. I'll be going from my P23 to my P1 and yours too. 8,532 of you voted, and as always, we don't agree on a lot of them. But that's the beauty of opinions, so sit back, grab a bevy, stroke your dog if you got one. My name's Tommo. Let's talk about it. Starting with P23, someone's got to come plumb dead last, and unfortunately, I've gone with Logan Sargeant. Look, Franco Colapinto came into that car and showed straight away that it is possible to match Alex Albon in qualifying in a Williams. Logan made zero progress really in his second season and was way too crashy, especially for a team like Williams who can't afford that crash damage. He wasn't the only one, don't get me wrong, but Logan was the worst. I maintain there was raw pace there, but he never showed it to the world in Formula 1. A shame, and he got rightfully replaced mid-season. I think that decision was vindicated from James Vowles. If anything, he should have got dropped sooner, to be honest. As for you, P23, 8,532 votes, with an average score out of 10 of 2.02, you've not gone for Logan Sargeant. You've gone for Checo. That is a bit of a crikey. It's been bad for Checo. Has it been the worst of anyone in F1? I guess maybe. You seem to think so anyway. But then P22 for me is Sergio Perez, is Checo. It's just not been good enough, has it? What saves Sergio from P last for me is that he did objectively have a pretty decent start to the year, right? Of the first 7 events, he was in the top 3 6 times. That can't be forgotten. But since then, it's been absolutely appalling. Nowhere near the top 5. An absolutely gargantuan gap between him and Max in the points. Silly mistakes. Clearly not the right man for that car. I don't think he ever has been, but particularly this year, the gap's been really exposed. You know, it wasn't that clear and obvious last year because Red Bull had an inherent car advantage. As soon as they lost that inherent car advantage, Checo is P8 by a mile. And as for you in P22, of course, it is Logan Sargeant with 2.14 out of 10. So for you, you outscored Sargeant ahead of Perez by 0.12. Close, although there are much closer ones here. P21, I've put Lance Stroll, another very disappointing season. Some silly errors, of course. Brazil was a particularly embarrassing one, 46 points shy of Fernando Alonso in a car that, you know, has always been fringe of the points, especially at the start of the season, less so at the end. Fernando capitalising way more than Lance. Fernando's a fantastic driver, and I think that makes the job more challenging for Lance. But even so, with all his experience, he really should be doing better. Give Drogovic the keys, I say, or maybe Yuki in 2026, or maybe Verstappen in 2026. I think that one could still maybe be on, but just go to WEC, Lance. I think that's the place for you. And as for you in P21 with 2.8 out of 10 on the dot, you've also gone Lance Stroll. We are in agreement here. Yeah, not been great, has it? P20 for me, Zhou Guanyu. Look, when the opportunity for points presented itself, he converted in Qatar with his P8. So credit to him for that. And I think he's run a Frankenstein car for a lot of this season, and I think it's made him look worse than he is. I'm going off of things you hear in the media, kind of insiders being like, yeah, he's really had a tough rub of the green. But at the same time, the reason he's had the more experimental car is because he hasn't been as good as his teammate. So, you know, that happens for a reason, right? But also the fact that Audi have ultimately let Zhou go, a Chinese driver, China's VW Group's biggest market in the world, that speaks to me that that inherent pace maybe isn't there. Because if there was even a slight justification to keep Zhou, surely they would have done it, because the whole point of F1 is marketing, right? And Audi are coming into market, and Audi are struggling, VW Group's struggling at the minute. Zhou made a lot of sense. For them to not keep him shows that they just wanted a fresh slate. For you in P20, you've also put Zhou Guanyu 3.97 out of 10, so it jumps by over a single point ahead of Lance Stroll, but still P20. As you know, these t-shirts are live on my website, tommosracinggoods.com, designed in today's video sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the perfect all-in-one platform to build out your very own online home, be that a blog, be that a portfolio, be that an e-commerce website like mine. Also, if you're in the EU, you're out of time to order the tees. Nothing to do with Squarespace, some GSPR, PSR stupid ruling thing, annoying. But anyway, if you're not in the EU, check out the website, look at the nice product pages, check out, you can use Squarespace payments, you can use Klarna, you can use PayPal. Since I started the website, I've had almost 300 orders and never had a problem. All works squeaky clean, perfect for me. Plus Squarespace's design intelligence AI software really helps make it just a breeze to set up a very, very decent looking website in pretty much no time at all, right? Free to try, only when you want to publish the website live to the web, you have to pay anything. When that time inevitably comes around, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off of your very first website or domain. P19 for me, I've gone Daniel Ricciardo. Now look, realistically, he didn't actually perform that bad relative to Tsunoda. I think Tsunoda slightly edged him out over the course of their time as teammates, but not by much. The reason Daniel's so low is it's expectation. I expect more from Daniel, right? With his experience and going for that Red Bull seat. The Daniel of old, the Daniel that I remember growing up, would have slapped up Yuki and beaten him. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I think he would have done a good job. I think he would have done a better job than Checo in that Red Bull. But there is no way he deserved a shot at the Red Bull. He hadn't brokered that opportunity. He hadn't shown enough in a Racing Bulls to prove that he merited it. The Miami sprint was a great result, but apart from the odd flash in the pan, he was just very average. And as for you in P19, you've also gone Daniel Ricciardo, 4.14 out of 10, about 0.2 ahead of Zhou Guanyu. P18 for me, I've gone Valtteri. I was really thinking about putting him higher, to be honest, because just giving him so little opportunity to showcase how good he's actually been, that it's really hard to say. Like, obviously, since the Vegas upgrade, it's looked better. Obviously, still hasn't been able to score a point. Was very unfortunate in Qatar with safety car timings and that. And has been very unlucky. Bottas has been very, very unlucky. It feels harsh putting in P18. He's just not been able to really show and prove and force down our necks just how good he's been. Apart from that, Q3 in Abu Dhabi, very impressive. All you can do is beat your teammate, right? And he has consistently outperformed Zhou Guanyu in 2024. So you have to give him credit for that. And as for you, you've also gone Valtteri Bottas, P18. Very similar so far, apart from Perez and Sargent. 4.85 out of 10. A pretty significant jump up from Daniel. That's like 0.7. P17, I've gone Kevin Magnussen. Now, yes, he has been consistently outperformed by Nico Hülkenberg this season, but towards this end part of the year, he has, I think, much improved. His 3 Q3s of the season have come in the last 5 events. So, recency bias is on Kevin's favour here and promotes him, I think, for me, ahead of Bottas. For too long, Haas were really reliant on Hulk carrying them, but I think, again, by the end of the year, Kevin really found his spark and ended Formula 1 in pretty good form, I'd say. Pretty good form. Cadillac 26, I think they should definitely be interested. Your P17, and this is where we start to deviate somewhat, 5.24 out of 10, you've gone with Liam Lawson. We'll get on to Liam when I talk about him. Interesting. P16 for me, I've gone Esteban Ocon. Now, he's been convincingly battered by Pierre in the second half of the season. In the first half of the season, it was pretty close, but I still think Gasly was the stronger of the two drivers. Of course, Esteban showed he's still very, 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 very good with that P2 in Brazil, right? He capitalised on that opportunity, maximised it, and delivered. It's a shame about his foolishness in Monaco, and I do think that car moved heavily in Gasly's favour towards the end of the year. Maybe not the car, but the team preference clearly did. I mean, Esteban didn't even get a proper send-off from Alpine. It was clearly a bad breakup, right? And if Esteban did have a crack in his chassis or any problems, they weren't going to address it, were they? Of course they're not, because he's the guy going out and it's ended in kind of negative terms, right? It's impossible to know to what extent this end of season drop off is Esteban versus Alpine. There's no smoke without fire. There's just been too many moments this year, and as much as there have been the highs, of course, I think P16 is fair for me. P16 for you, Kevin Magnussen, 5.62 out of 10. So a 0.4 basically jump up from Liam Lawson. P15 for me, I've gone Liam Lawson. Now, the 6-0 quali head-to-head versus Yuki Tsunoda is getting thrown around a lot. I think there's more to it than that. I mean, 3 of those 6 sessions, Liam was within a 10th of Yuki. There's more context, right? I think a head-to-head quali stat doesn't really tell us much. And the thing is, Liam's only got 11 F1 races to his name versus Yuki's 87, and I think that all comes into it, right? His adaptability to jump in mid-season and perform as close to Yuki as he has done, I think deserves plaudits. He's not been a pushover by any stretch. He's been, poking the Alonso bear a bit. But all in all, also Liam's kept it pretty clean. He's not been shoving it in the barriers. And I think given the relative lack of experience, I think Liam's done a very good job. I could see why Red Bull would go for him because there's more theoretical ceiling for him to grow into. He's much more green than Yuki is. To be honest, like driver A to driver B, he's done a pretty similar job to Ricciardo relative to Tsunoda. The difference is Liam is way younger, way less experienced. Your P15 is Esteban Ocon with 5.67 out of 10, only 0.05 ahead of Kevin Magnussen. So that's the closest pairing so far, K-Mag and Ocon for you lot. P14 for me, I'm going Franco Colapinto. An amazing start out of the blocks. Monza, Baku, Singapore. He made a real impression over those first 3 of the 9 Grand Prix he's done in Formula 1. When you also add into the mix the burden almost of expectation from the Argentinian fan base, who obviously so desperately want to see him represent them in Formula 1. He lost his grandfather as well in those early weekends. I think he's done a very, very good job, and he's demonstrated a pace ceiling that gives Williams something to work towards. A pace ceiling that Logan Sargeant never really proved. I believe it was there, but he never actually showed it. Franco showed it straight away, getting pulled out of F2. Obviously impressed when he did FP1 in Silverstone and has since delivered on that impressiveness. Lots of crashes as of late, and Williams of course can't afford that, and maybe that crashiness has resulted in Alpine and Red Bull's interest kind of waning. And I think that's going to work for Colapinto long term. I think him being a really strong reserve behind Albon and Sainz in 2025, he'll be nipping at the bud. He's shown he can perform. It's just working on making him more well-rounded. The way he's come out of nowhere and just performed has been impressive. He's certainly made his mistakes, and I think he'll be a better driver for those mistakes. P14 for you, Alex Albon, 5.84 out of 10. So not even 0.2 ahead of Ocon. I'm not sure I agree with that. But then I'm probably biased, right? P13 for me, Alex Albon. Now, of course, when Franco Colapinto jumps into that seat, big pressure, right? Because Franco was delivering quick lap times, out-qualifying Alex early doors. But over the totality of their time as teammates in those 9 races, Alex has pretty convincingly had the 1 lap pace over Franco when you consider it all together. Alex has been crashy as well over the course of the year. He's had his fair share. I do think, when you think Sargeant, Colapinto and Albon have all been crashy, what's the common denominator? It's the car. I think the Williams is a particularly difficult car and has made it particularly difficult for Sargeant and Colapinto as newbies, and even Albon struggled with it. 4-point scoring finishes in a pretty uncompetitive car. He's done well, especially earlier on in the season. He banks P13 thanks to early season performances. I'm really buzzing to see him against Sainz just to see how he stacks up. I think he'll stack up well, but again, maybe I'm just biased. P13 for you is Franco Colapinto, 6.05 out of 10. So a 0.2 jump up from Alex Albon. P12 for me, I've gone Yuki Tsunoda. Now, I was worried after Bahrain, after he had a bit of his head loss moment at the start of the year. But he has been pretty consistent this year. He's had his Hungary crashed, Mexico crashed in qualifying as well. But generally speaking, he's been pretty consistent. He's certainly worked on his hot-headedness, and he's become a more well-rounded racing driver. He was slightly better than Ricciardo as their time as teammates. He's doing slightly better than Lawson over their time as teammates, and he deserves the Red Bull shot. Today, as I record, he will have done the tyre test for the Red Bull today, I hope. That's the one I hope Yuki gets to see because he deserves it, and I want to see the drivers who deserve opportunities get them. I'm not so sure he will. Look, there is still a bit of inconsistency in there with Yuki, and I'm a huge Yuki fan, right? I think P12 is a fair place to put him. But as for you, with 6.32 out of 10, you've put Fernando Alonso, which is interesting. Again, not sure if I agree with that. P11 for me is Ollie Bearman. The Chelmsford bias is strong, okay? Go at me, but I'm backing it. I honestly think he's done a fantastic job, right? Called up late doors, in Saudi, after he put it on pole in F2, by the way, and then had to avoid that, and put it P7 with Lando and Lewis chasing him down at the end in Saudi. Very, very, very good job. Scored points in Baku, having out-qualified Nico Hülkenberg, and out-qualified Nico in both Brazil sprint and feature race. Yes, the Brazil race wasn't great, but it wasn't great for Nico either. Like, to come in and out-qualify Nico Hülkenberg 3 times, come on. This kid's mustard. I'm sorry, he just is. I don't think that's just because he's from Chelmsford. I really don't. I actually think he is just objectively really good, and Ferrari have pushed for him to get a Haas seat for a reason. When Lewis eventually retires from Ferrari, however long this final stint lasts, I do think Ollie's going to be there. P11 for you is also Ollie Bearman, 6.63 out of 10, so a 0.3 jump up from Fernando Alonso. Obviously, it's hard to rate Ollie's season because he's only done 3 races, but I feel like 3 is enough of a sample set to at least have something to go on. 1, 2, no, but 3, you've just squeaked in, Ollie. So now top 10 time, and gone Lewis Hamilton, P10 for me. Unbelievable highs in Silverstone, great drive, and Spa, great drive. Race pace typically is quicker than George. These are all ticks, these are all good things that Lewis has achieved in 2024, but the contrast to the lows, you look at Canada, you look at Baku, 1 lap pace hasn't been there. When Lewis isn't there, he's really not there. That's the problem, right? And it's hard to judge a driver who's had such an up and down season, but I value consistency when I look at drivers, probably more than anything else, consistency of extracting your full ability, and just Lewis hasn't been able to do it this year, and George has made him look second best. And as for you in P10, you've also put Lewis Hamilton, 6.7 out of 10, so only 0.07 ahead of Ollie Bearman. P9 for me, I've gone Fernando Alonso. He's had a low-key season this year, as have both Aston Martin drivers, to be honest, but I do feel like most weekends he's close to maximising that car's potential. He's been way more consistent this year at getting close to that potential than Lewis has. I mean, when he's not in the points, he's usually P11, right? He's been P11 a lot this year. It's been a difficult season. I think he's done as much as he can. I think it's obviously really understandably tested his patience in the same way that the Mercedes will have tested Lewis's patience, but the Mercedes is clearly a better car than the Aston Martin. I think it's been easy to overlook Fernando this season, but there's been some really good performances that have gone under the radar, and I want to bring them to the radar. And P9 for you, 6.83 out of 10, Yuki Tsunoda. Top 10, better than Lewis. Lewis has had way higher peaks, but then lower troughs than Yuki. I'm sticking P12, to be honest. P8 for me, Pierre Gasly. Really strong since the Austin upgrade. Reminds me of a prime 21 Gasly, to be honest, in many ways. Even before the upgrade as well, I think he was stronger than Ocon in the first half of the season. He's really made that team his own during the French Civil War, and looking very good for 25. Could have put him higher, you know, no crash damage either, but it's a lot of unknowns towards that start of the season. You know, hard to really see how Pierre's performances manifested when that car was right at the back. I could have put him higher, definitely, but I'm sticking with P8. P8 for you, 7.51 out of 10, George Russell. Big disagree here. Although, I will say, spoiler, somewhat, these next 5 places, in fact, are split by less than 0.2. You lot really like sitting on the fence more than I do, come on. P7 for me, I've gone Carlos Sainz. Superb in Australia post-operation, Mexico and Vegas as well, great drives from him. Can be guilty of going a bit missing. Had a very crashy Brazil, just didn't have Charles' pace in Monza either, for example. He's been an incredible servant to Ferrari, like no doubt, taken 2 fantastic race wins this year, obviously. Yes, he was quite lucky in Australia, but also, bro, he just had his appendix out, like, come on. And especially impressive given he's on the way out of Ferrari. And I think that's what puts Sainz ahead of Gasly for me. Sainz knows he's leaving. He's got all that potential kind of insecurity in his mind about, oh, are they giving me a worse setup, or blah, 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 they prioritise and show. And Carlos has just pushed through it, and I think he's been the most impressive driver this year of those that are going out of their teams. P7 for you, Pierre Gasly, 7.52 out of 10. So only 0.01 ahead of Russell. Very, very close with George Russell, but you've slightly outscored Pierre over Jorge. P6 for me, Oscar Piastri. To win twice amongst this calibre of field in only your 2nd season, I think is so impressive. And I am taking that junior nature of his career into account for sure. I think Lando is quicker over a lap and he's more consistently getting to that ceiling, but Oscar can absolutely outqualify Lando. Like, he's very, very close quite often. But again, Lando's way more experienced than Oscar, so fair enough. And I certainly have a belief that there is more potential performance Oscar is going to unlock going into his third season next year. Unbelievable moves on lap 1 against his teammate in Hungary and in Monza, obviously. World is. They've both got mistakes in them, him and Carlos, actually. I think Oscar and Carlos are quite similar in many ways, and they both have the pace to outqualify their teammates on any given weekend, but are both not as quick as their teammates. P6 for you. You've also gone Oscar Piastri, 7.58 out of 10, so a 0.06 gap between him and Pierre Gasly in P7. P5 for me, Nico Hülkenberg. He was P2 in my mid-season report because he came out the gates flying. He's had a few wobbles. He's been out-qualified by Ollie a few too many times for my liking. He didn't have any stinkers in the first half of the season. He's had a few. Brazil, again, was quite bad. Spa wasn't great either. But look, he has done the carry, and it has 41 of their 57 points have been via Nico. And surely he's got the record for most P11s in a season. 7 times he's finished P11 this year. That must... Is it a record? Give this man a podium before he retires. He so deserves it. He so deserves it. It's mad that CHINWAG rocked up in his first ever weekend in F1, got a podium, never touched one since, and Nico's never had one. P5 for you, Carlos Sainz, 7.65 out of 10, which is 0.07 ahead of Oscar Piastri. Very, very close. P4 for me, George Russell. Particularly in the second half of the season, he's really come on strong. He's continued to put Lewis down in qualifying and really hammered that advantage home. Without that Spa disqualification, the gap would be even bigger. Mid-season report, that was the biggest pushback from you lot in the comments, that I didn't rate George highly enough, and perhaps I didn't. And you know what, I think I've been guilty of underrating George for a long time now, but I feel like I'm finally on board, and I think he's proven a lot of doubters, myself included, wrong this year. He's not quite top 3, but he's had a hell of a good season as George. Still lacking a little bit of Lewis's race pace mastery, but has proven in Vegas he can dominate a race from the front, and just been way more consistent than Lewis this year, which again, I value that very highly as a fan rating a driver. P4 for you, Nico Hülkenberg, 7.70 out of 10. So again, George Russell P8, 7.51. Nico Hülkenberg P4, 7.70. Not even 0.2 between George and Nico. And fair enough, I think Nico merits it. I'm glad you lot have still propped Nico and it wasn't just some early season stuff. Like, he does deserve the credit. Top 3 time. These 3 were very clear. We all know who these 3 are. And in P3 for me this season, I've gone Lando Norris. Lando has missed opportunities. The team has missed opportunities. Even in Singapore, when Lando won dominantly, he almost crashed twice, which would have been really bad if he had. But he didn't, but it was close. It was too close. Yes, Lando's missed opportunities, but you have to give credit for Lando to get in that position in the first place, right? I see a lot of people clowning on Lando because he's messed up or whatever, but like, he's the person who got himself into that opportunity in the first place anyway. And yes, the McLaren might be the best all-rounder now, I think, as the season has finished, but it has, I think, always throughout the season varied depending on the track, right? There's been swings in performance race to race, and McLaren's always been pretty good, but it hasn't always been the best car every single weekend. Lando's unbelievably quick over a lap, of course. He has great race management as well. It's just that little X factor to beat Max, to be able to take Max on his own game. I think it's important next year, if Lando wants to win the title, he gaps Max at the start of the year, and then Max is the one doing the chasing, because Lando chasing Max, I don't think it's going to work. P3 for you, with 8 on the dot out of 10, is also Lando Norris. So we agree. P3. P2 for me, Charles Leclerc. You know I love Charles. You know I'm a huge fan. You know I believe he is the next best after Max. And I think he's shown it this year. I think he's personally done more to extract the maximum of his car than Lando has been able to extract the maximum of his. If not for that Ferrari wobble, the correlation issues with the new floor after Monaco, Leclerc's absolutely in the title fight. And to finish only however many points he finished behind Lando at the end of the season, again, with such a wobble for Ferrari at the start of the year, like 2 races in a row with 0 points for Charles, I think he's been the better driver this year, and I think he's the guy who can take it to Max better than anyone else in Formula 1. Like, Leclerc's that guy. He knows how to race Max his way. He knows how to race everyone else incredibly fairly, wheel to wheel with Lewis and Oscar more recently. unbelievable. His racecraft is better than anyone in Formula 1 if you ask me. Unbelievable overlap as well. Give him the car Ferrari and he will deliver. Oh, and Lewis has got a hell of a fight in his hands because Charles Leclerc, man, he ain't playing. P2 for you, also Charles Leclerc, 8.57 out of 10. So over half a point jump up from Lando Norris, and I agree. So then finally P1 for me, and obviously P1 for you. You've given him 9.21 out of 10. Big score. Max Verstappen. Look, he banked his early advantage, didn't he? Early doors, that Red Bull was the quickest car. He was extracting the maximum out of that car as well. Would have been even bigger advantage without the car breaking down. Brazil was his greatest drive of his career and one of the greatest drives of all time in Formula 1. I maintain it wasn't a great race. It was just a great individual performance from Max Verstappen. In the same way that Donington 93 is Senna's greatest race probably, but that race as a total doesn't go down as an all-time banger, does it? Max has proven even when that Red Bull's struggling, and yeah, it does rile him up a bit and he gets wound up on the radio, but he will still maximise that car week in, week out. We have seen mistakes from Max, don't get me wrong, and I think he was over the line in Mexico, and when he hit Lewis in Hungary wasn't too great either, even hitting Oscar, you know, in Abu Dhabi, but Max is still the best driver in Formula 1. He's still the cut above and he's still the man to beat in 25. Oh, and he destroyed Checo once again and delivered the Drivers' Championship with no support, right? No teammate to back him up and help with strategy. Checo was nowhere, Max was everywhere. And there we have it, the full 23. Not controversial at all. This is fact, of course. Look, I know one of you is going to print screen this and put it on Twitter and flame me. So at least do it when I'm posing nicely next to him. Let's see, like that. Yeah, is that right? What a year we've had. It's been so good this season. Like, I cannot wait for 25. Surely it's going to be sick. And I don't mind Max winning every season as long as it's competitive, as long as it's close. And the thing is, in 25, Max won't get that head start like he did this year. So it should go down to the wire. George Russell in a Mercedes, Max in a Red Bull. McLaren's definitely, maybe Lewis as well in his Ferrari. If he could sort out quali pace, I think he could definitely be up there with his race management. I can't wait. Thank you for watching and supporting what I do. I really do appreciate it. Buy a t-shirt if you want it as well. TOMMO'SRacingGoods.com. Thank you Squarespace for sponsoring this video. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.